Alright, we are now in part 3 of my Predators review. If you haven't watched the first two parts, watch the first two parts. And now to pick up where we left off with Lawrence Fishburne's character. Lawrence Fishburne's character kind of comes in after they make first contact with the Predators and their little Predator dogs and all that stuff. And actually, we'll talk about Fishburne first, and I'll talk about how they come across him. Fishburne winds up taking him back to his lair that he's been hiding out. He says he's been there for 10 seasons. I'm guessing we can equate that to years. Delicious water again. So he's been there for 10 years, equivalent, and he takes him back to what he says is an old drilling platform, and it looks like this is a giant old drill. So we're assuming that we were implying here that this planet was originally stripped for resources, and then some predators came along and said, "Well, we have no more use for this planet. Let's turn it into a game reserve and hunt stuff here." That's basically the backstory that's implied to us about this planet that they're on. But as Fishburne gets in there, he brings everyone in with all their equipment. First of all, he has an imaginary friend. Fishburne tries to play kind of loony. He's constantly going over and talking to his buddy that's not there. It's kind of funny. He doesn't do the best of crazy person, mainly because they're still trying to keep him somewhat tamed. They're not trying to pull him out completely batshit insane. I guess if he was that batshit insane, these guys probably wouldn't go with him. He's kind of obviously insane, but still kind of there enough that you'd kind of follow him. But Fishburne basically has been surviving here on this planet because he killed a predator or two and has stolen their gear. He actually has the stealth gear and shit. That's how he's been following them. But he leaves them back. He has the guys sit in a room. We'll spend the night here. And then at some point he kind of traps him in there. He's gonna smoke him and poison him and kill them, so he can take their gear. That's how he's basically been surviving. Every new group of people, after a few of them have been killed off and they're exhausted and they're desperate, he confronts them, he brings them back to this place and kills them. Not with this group, though, because, of course, Adrien Brody is there to save the day and alert the Predators to come and basically wind up rescuing them. Predators kind of show up, and I don't want to ruin too much there. So we'll skip that. But there is an interesting thing, because this is the bigger, and I said this right before, that when they first come across Lawrence Fishburne's character, they set up a little defensive position, because they now know, this is after they've kind of at one point decided to backtrack to Predators. They were first attacked by their dogs, which I'll get into, and then they kind of eventually decide they should Brody tricks everybody into backtracking the dogs, and they find a Predator's ritualistic grounds, because basically he wants to find out who the hell is hunting them and stuck them in this place. And so they make their first encounter with the Predators, and they're now aware, okay, these things are big, they have high-tech weapons, and they have stealth tech. So at this point they decide, okay, it's time we should dig in, and they set up a trap, and this other alien they think it's a predator at first, and even we, the audience, think it's a predator at first, until they send, actually, hilariously, they send Topher Grace to be the bait. He's being chased by this thing, and Lawrence Fishburne, nobody has the shot, and Lawrence Fishburne takes a shot and saves him, killing this alien who, it looks kind of humanoid. And you might be wondering, since this is a very quick scene, why this is kind of exciting. For me, I'm a big Aliens and Predators fan, and even the AVP movies I don't mind. I know a lot of people hate the first one and are okay with the second one, and other people are okay with the second. A smaller group are okay with the second, okay with the first one and hate the second one. It's a weird thing that in the community. I kind of don't mind both. They're obviously not as good as either the Predators or the Aliens movies themselves, but this introduces a brand new independent race, because it was being hunted. It's not like the Predator dogs, which are shown earlier, which the Predators are using and control. This is like another race. It might be sentient, and so therefore it exists within this aliens and predators universe. So it'll be interesting to see in the future if this species is we come across it in the aliens universe anywhere. Probably not in the movies. Well, maybe. We'll see what Ridley Scott does, but I don't think he's going to pay that much attention to this. But we'll see, especially like in comics and video games, whether they decide to bring this into the aliens universe to have more crossover. Which is why and if you're an Aliens versus Predator fan, or just a fan of this universe, it's a great thing. But the weird thing with these things is they're not too humanoid, and it shows when they're dropped down in cages. Or they're not too humanoid. They are pretty much humanoid. They're not exactly like humans. Their limbs are a little bit different, but they're in cages, and I don't get why they weren't in parachutes too. Other than to have a big cage for people to find and add more mystery earlier on in the film. And I was actually surprised, because earlier in the film they come across a bunch of cages that have been dropped with the Predator parachutes and are opened up, and I assume they're just the Predator dogs, which we saw in the trailer. It would make sense, but apparently they're a completely other race, and they're somewhat sentient, somewhat smart. Apparently don't have guns or anything, so maybe they're just also martial artists. I don't know. It leaves a lot to the imagination, but in a good way. Sometimes films fail when they don't tell you anything. Other times, a film can do a lot of good by not explaining too much stuff to you and letting you kind of think and wonder. That's what this movie does. Let me go back, because I've been talking about them, the Predator dogs. This is a nice little way to add a little action scene in there before introducing the Predators. The only problem I have with this scene, it's not too bad. It's somewhat supposed to fill the space of when they're firing wildly into the jungle in the first film. It's somewhat reminiscent of that, only they're actually shooting stuff they can clearly see. But the one character, the Russian, Nikolai, he has the fucking minigun. Why he has this thing in Chechnya, I don't know. I'm not even sure if the Russians use miniguns at all. For special operations, they tend to like their weapons pretty light. They prefer light and nimble, and I'm pretty sure that goes for the Spetsnaz as well as the U.S. and other people's special forces. So I don't know why he has this massive minigun. Especially for the Russians, because they have so many tanks and APCs. There's no reason for to have their guys hold a minigun. If you want a big heavy weapon like that, you should just mount it on one of the thousands of tanks you have. But I digress. He's wailing away at the minigun, and so is all these other guys. And everybody in there is supposed to be a crack top killer. Anyone that has a gun is supposed to be a crack shot. They have a sniper with them too. And they're not hitting these things, and it's not like they're incredibly fast. They are incredibly fast, but they're running at them head on. Especially the guy with the minigun. He just has to tilt that thing in an arc, and the whole purpose of a minigun is anything in the general direction in front of it is just going to be wiped out by bullets. And they have a sniper and I said everybody else who's supposed to be really good shots. And yet they hit some, but it's obvious that they're missing a bunch of times, and these things are not getting... I was like, okay, they should be hitting these things. They're not going that much faster than animals on Earth, and we're dealing with a bunch of really crack shots here. Especially one that has a weapon that you should just... Brody's got a shotgun, so he doesn't even have to be that careful with his aim. And the other guy has a minigun. This firefight actually should have took about 2 seconds. 3 if they just wanted to mutilate the bodies further. But it wasn't that bad. It was still an exciting scene. Don't take that as full criticism of that scene. It's just it's the only nitpick I really have with this film. Crap, we're going into another part. This is amazing. This is awesome. I'm continuing to talk about this film. So stay tuned for the next part.